Welcome to Thirsty Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jessie, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. I am interviewing Laura Becraft and Lauren Ward, co-founders of Brazen Imports. This interview on Thirsty Thursdays podcast is their first media appearance after creating this venture last year. I'm super stoked to be the outlet they chose to talk about what this dynamic duo does at Brazen Imports and their exciting announcement of launching the Brazen Trails Foundation. That's right, you heard it first right here on Thirsty Thursdays, the day before International Women's Day, March 8th. Laura and Lauren really want to give back in a big way, and so they want to help selective women in our industry be very successful. And they have an amazing background of all different types of experiences and can really help a lot of people. I'm excited to announce that here first on Thirsty Thursdays. I also wanted to point out, as the podcast starts, we just hit the record button, so it has a different feel to it. Laura and Lauren refer to John King quite a bit, and that's their big client, Tops, which we know as the original Pickle Shot. So they do talk about John throughout the podcast, and that's who they're referring to. I did interview John on November 9th of 2023, and you can listen to that podcast via the link in the show notes. His low elk pickle shot is on fire across the country. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I do. Ciao.
Yes, I'm the only one with the drink. I have a lot of drinks here, but this is my Tops Pickle Shot. Bloody Mary.
I am so jealous right now.
Kids, so great way to start.
I love that stuff.
We're gonna get you some.
Yeah, I love those cocktails.
To your second home.
Yeah, it's so easy to drink.
They're good. The brand is on fire. It's just crazy. We had no idea how many pickle fanatics there were out there, but it's really transcended now. It's not.
I'll go back.
It's everybody.
I'm sure it was like a precursor to help people think that they, think to use pickle juice as a shot, right? I mean, that's kind of.
Yeah. We've done a lot of these phone calls lately with distributors and just different people in general, and it's just the perfect.
It's so fun.
Brand right now, it's crazy. I mean, we're on track. It's so fun, right? It's so fun. That's what you hope for in this industry. You get lucky and you hit these brands sometimes, and it's just so fun. I mean, we probably will do about 300,000 cases this year in 23 states. So, yeah. And it's all organic growth, which we're just fueling the flames and making strategic changes for John, which you had on not too long ago, John King, our client. And it's just so much fun to see.
How many states are you opening up this year? Do you know yet?
Well, good question. Lauren and I took it over. We stopped opening states for 6 months because there were a lot of logistical things that we wanted to get under control behind the scenes. And the brand, look, this brand, when you have a brand that's growing 300% every year, I mean,
there's got to be a plan.
Yeah.
And it was, there's got to be a plan. It goes back to the perfect storm piece too, that it's just everything is right for this brand in the industry right now. The culinary piece, the resurgence with pickle juice, with the good for you feels, the low ABV, all of it is just happening at once. And there was a lot logistically we wanted to get under control before we open any additional states. So we do have Texas. Right. So it'll be ready for you when you get back. Texas should be open. Yeah, we're opening Texas soon. And then some different control states Lauren's working on. And then we will work on...
Yeah, probably 6 states all said and done by the end of the year. We need to open South Carolina, Indiana, Ohio, and Minnesota from an open state perspective. And then I'm dying to expand the control states, but I'm patiently waiting.
Yeah.
So TBD, but on the rest of
It's gotta
those,
be
but
done
yeah.
right. Like
It's I actually was out on a work with in Maryland, and I relaunched the brand with our distributor there last week. And I called Laura at the end of the day, and it's kind of what we already knew. But I think one of the most interesting things is the span of the accounts and the consumer. It's young college kids that are taking shots,
yeah.
older people drinking martinis, Bloody Marys. It's mixology accounts, it's dive bars, and it's spanning this like something for everyone. And I think that there's still a lot of runway for the brand to grow from a use perspective.
That is so interesting. Well, it shows you the versatility of the brand. I mean, being mixology and in cocktails to just a shot. I mean, that's pretty versatile. And then the low alcohol is, right at the right time, right? Because this low ABV,
Yeah.
low and no movement that's behind it right now is
Not going away.
certainly going to, I think, be a positive.
For sure. And anybody who says that that's not, like
It's
there's
not.
people like, oh, that'll go away. It's not going away. I mean, the next generation of consumers, they're looking for the lower ABV options. My daughter's the next generation of consumer, and they just drink differently. It's very different. But there's always something to be said for all of it. It's just, again, the right combinations of things. It's very, for me, when Lauren brought the brand to me last summer, and I was like, no, pickle.
She thought I was crazy.
I couldn't wrap my head around it at first, and then she
I'm like, no, hold on, look at this.
She's very good at that, and a consummate salesperson. So we met with John, and I was like, oh my God. And for me, it's very reminiscent of Patron in the early days. Like, obviously different, one's a luxury brand, one's more of the everyday brand, but the cult following, the organic growth, just all of that, and how hard John has worked on the recipe. Like, that's one thing a lot of people don't understand, is that it's not easy to make pickle products. Like, that is something he has been working on for years. I mean, being able to working with Brian is complicated. So he's done such a great job. There's the formula, everything, and just to have 300,000 cases with no national advertising, no national marketing, all word of mouth, People are buying it on word of mouth.
A lot of small distributors.
It's so exciting. And we did hire, a lot of small distributors. We did hire a female agency out of California who is going to start working on it. They've already started. So to kind of tell the story a little better, because it's a remarkable story, and I don't think it's being done justice right now. Just John's whole story in general. It's everybody's dream, right? Especially people in our industry, to fight that hard. You're a bartender, to make a brand. It's just a really feel good story. So we're excited. We're proud of it.
So, question: as far as the distribution goes, was he using beer distributors, or what? How did he start out to kind of get that momentum behind him?
I'll let you answer.
Okay, so it's kind of a combination. So they actually started, so the bar that the brand started at's in Maryland. So they started out honestly getting pickle juice from like all the bars in the area and like making it themselves at the bar. So they started out contracting distilling in Delaware, and then they were distributing
pickle juice from
yeah
restaurants, because nobody had.
So once they found a food supplier to provide the pickle juice, they started making it in Delaware, and they bottled it and they sold it through a small distributor in Delaware. And then actually we have Breakthrough in Maryland, so a larger distributor in Maryland. After that, when they started expanding, I believe that the first distributor was out in Kansas, which ironically, I'm actually going there this afternoon. He's texting me as we speak. And they were one of the first distributors to take on the brand, which is a small beer distributor. And they've done a really, really good job. Kansas is actually the second largest state in the country for the brand. And then they've had a mix. Yeah, so Kansas, which, historically you see it more growing from the outside to the in, it's kind of the opposite. So Kansas and Missouri are the largest markets. Laura and I are actually going out to Missouri this week as well. But it started within the Midwest, mainly with beer distributors. In some of the larger, like, control states, they have wine and spirits brokers, but they're not with the main larger organization. It's for a combination, right? In some states, they tried to get into the larger distributors and were turned down in the beginning. In some cases, they just didn't have the connections to get in. So it was kind of a mix. They have RNDC in a few markets, and then they have Breakthrough in a couple of states. But then other than that, it's primarily beer wholesalers, and it's a mix of AB and Miller Coors. So it's not just one
Right.
across the board. And then some wine and smaller craft distributors in a couple of states too. But the distributors have really got behind the brand and actually got out there and built the brand, from the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
Which is nice to see.
Yeah, the top market like Missouri, Illinois, Kansas,
Colorado.
So it's nice because it's not being built. Everybody looks to its top 5 liquor states, and this is really being built from the inside and spreading out through the country. So
That is really cool. I've never heard of that before, but that's what makes this so unique.
Yeah.
yeah.
The events are a lot of fun. We've been doing a lot of like tasting events in different states. We did one in New Jersey, and I had to like send them. I was like, you guys have to read this recap because from the agency, and it's fun because it's like we see it obviously a lot because we're the ones talking to people, but it's always like validating to see the perspective from someone else's, opinion, and then sharing that out with the distributors as well. I think the Brokeworth I went on Thursday, every single account took it in on premise. And like I said, it was from like mixology accounts that are going to put it in a spicy margarita, to dive bars in, the outskirts of the area. So it's just like, it's all over the place. And it's been every trade show we've done has been interesting, regardless of the age. It's something that people are like, I don't know. And then they're coming back and they're coming back and they're coming back to the table. And they're like, this was my favorite. We did a festival. The owner, actually, John, was down in Atlanta over the weekend and texted Laura and I, and they ran through pretty much all of the product in the first 4 hours of a 6-hour event. And we're one of the most popular tables. And that's like been pretty consistent everywhere we've gone, which is nice to see. People are really excited. I think it's also like something new and it's different. And there hasn't been a lot of new products out there that have been different, right? There's a lot of flavored vodkas out there, but there's not something that is this taste profile, which is nice.
Yeah, my home state of Iowa. I went back home this fall sometime.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. I'm from Fredericksburg, Iowa, a town of, I think it's 905 people or something these days. And we have 2 bars, and one's a restaurant bar and one's just a bar. And we're at the bar, my brother and his fiance, and obviously we're from a small town, so we know a lot of people that are in the bar. But here we are on the back bar of this bar is is Tom's pickle juice, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me! It's here! And so of course we had to have a shot, and I have a picture of it. I forgot to send it to you. It just blew my mind.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job in Iowa.
Iowa just exceeded it. Just outpaced what brand, Lauren, in Iowa?
Not yet. It's on track. I won't say now, but it's on track to quickly be the fastest growing flavored vodka in Iowa.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a vodka state, I think, too.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
Well, the product's made there too, so there's definitely like a little bit of a following there. But it's the fastest growing brand in the state right now. I think the original 750 is growing like 499% through January on a rolling 12. So I mean, it's on fire, which is good to see. They're getting ready to launch the ones 375 next week.
And then we have some great innovation for next year, so that'll be fun. But yeah, good stuff. We're excited. We have big year ahead.
So just a quick question about back to distribution. Do you think that the fact that it was distributed in a slightly different, I guess non-traditional channel, meaning not a spirit house, wine and spirit distributor house, do you think that this brand just fit with other, distributors and mindsets and the way they go to approach accounts?
Yeah.
That kind of helped really
I think it's a lot of where the credit is due is that started. I think it was the right network to get the brand up and going. I think a lot of the beer, the consumption is very similar, right? So if they're calling on accounts that are shot in beer places, it's perfect for that, just from the way that the brand's being consumed.
Yeah, I think Lauren mentioned this on another conversation we had. Not every brand can do something like that. Like, you may, high end scotch might not go to maybe down the road because the beer companies are changing a lot. But this brand, was the right profile for a lot of those states with the beer distributors. And, it's just a lot of this, I think, is ripe for it to come back to that neighborhood feel with this brand, like neighborhood bar feel. I mean, it's making a resurgence again. There was some articles I read recently. It's just people with the economy and everything. They're looking for more of their outside their. We had this conversation not too long ago, Jessie, where we were talking about people circling back to their neighborhood bars, back to that easy feel, but beer and a shot, things like that. That's there's a big, I think, focus for that.
Simplicity.
Simplicity. Everything's so complicated now, right?
Yeah.
So
Are the bartenders embracing it as well? Like as a pickleback?
Well, that's been like a new thing. So that's been like fairly new. I would say it kind of started out in the dive bars and it was more of a shot, Bloody Marys, obviously from a brunch perspective. But what we're starting to see is that they're utilizing it more like a modifier. So they're utilizing it as pickle brine, basically, right? So in the craft cocktail scenes, because it's inconsistent. And one of the sales reps, actually the distributor, brought this up too. Pickle juice is inconsistent and also it goes bad and has to be refrigerated. And so that's one of the things where this gives them a simple, consistent recipe that has a 2-year shelf life they don't have to worry about, where they can use it instead of pickle brine and not have to worry about from a food perspective because I don't know if you've ever had pickle brine that's gone bad, but it does not taste good. So that's one of the biggest things. And they were telling, one of the bartenders actually in Maryland was saying, like, we've made cocktails, not realizing it's gone bad and it's just inconsistent. So I think it can offer consistency as a modifier that, other things can't, which
that's
is nice.
really interesting.
And that's fairly new. I'd say that's like a new segment that we're starting to see now. But pickles, as we've talked about before, like as a food or having a moment. So it's kind of a combination. They're all looking at stuff like that. And I wasn't sure in the beginning. Like Laura and I talked a lot about it and we didn't know. So that's why, we're like, we'll talk to the distributors ourselves. We're going to go out and manage it. And that's why we're going to Kansas and Missouri this week to see exactly what is happening in some of these states.
Because John is the only brand that we manage the sales for. We do a lot of consulting work, which we could get into Brazen and talk about Brazen. But John's the one we manage the sales for. So.
Well, do you want to, Lauren, just talk briefly, since we've spoken about John and his brand, do you want to just talk about how you met him and how he kind of rolled into what you guys are building?
Yeah, so I'm from Maryland originally. I live in South Florida now. So I just moved back in July to be closer to Laura. So we started Brazen back in technically May of 2023. So we're coming up on a year. We met at another company prior to this. Laura was the director of operations and I was running national accounts and control states. So that's how we met. John, I spoke with, it's probably been about 5 years ago now. So it was like at the very beginning. And one of the sales reps from the distributor that I knew asked me to just talk to him and gave him my cell phone number. And he called and he was asking me for advice. I think it was about Pennsylvania, which is complicated and so much fun. So
I've heard the stories
around that. And then, yeah, I was like, and I don't remember exactly the context of the conversation, but that's how we first met. And yeah. And then we started, I think I remember saying, don't go to Pennsylvania yet. You should wait. And, here we are today. But when we started the brand or the Brazen up in May, we had connected back then on LinkedIn. And I think we were friends maybe on social media. And he had reached out to me on LinkedIn and they were making some changes. And the brand obviously was at kind of a breaking point in terms of the growth and he was looking for some help. And then ironically, I was moving in July. He's also down here in Deerfield Beach. Laura's obviously in Boynton. So I told her, I was like, I'm going to talk to him and have a call. And then she was like, I'm not selling pickle vodka. I was like, I'm going to see what he says. And like,
I'm
one of the
good
things
about it,
like,
because now it's like, oh my God, it's so fun.
yeah, and it was like one of those things where I was like, I want to see where he's at and like what's happening now, you know, and I always take people's call. I feel like at least listen to what they
Yeah.
have to say. So he kind of told me where he's at, and I was like, do you have validated data that says this? And he was like, well, we have VIP. And I'm like, that will do the trick. So I like told him what we needed from VIP, and he sent us some numbers, and I sent it to Laura, and I remember calling her, and I'm like, just, you should meet him. So we went to lunch, and we like went through the story, and you know, they're not from the spirits business. I mean, he's bartended and things like that, but they don't know the distribution, the sales side of the business, and they have a great story, but they definitely needed help. And John's a good guy. So the three of us got together, and then we started working on the brand like towards the end of the summer.
Yeah. One of the big things we did first is that we moved to Park Street. You know, he was just out, the vendor he was with previously, and it's no knock on them or anything. They just were not equipped to handle this volume.
The volume.
Park Street, we're familiar with Park Street, obviously, and they're in Miami, and they've been great partners. And we've done a lot of acquisition work in our life, in our previous lives, and it went seamlessly. And Park Street has been phenomenal. So can't say.
That's one of probably the main things we get called about is help from a compliance and logistics standpoint, which I wasn't expecting as much. I mean, obviously we get calls with like the specialty channels, like Laura mentioned earlier, with like military cruise lines, control states, but we get a decent amount of calls for just compliance work.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's a good question, because we get that asked a lot. Like, what do we do? Because we don't really advertise, and we don't. Most of the work that we do, I would say 90% of the work we do is only by referral. Like if we know somebody. So, you know, Brazen, what we do is we are a full service consulting, managerial in some aspects. We do not manage sales for every brand, because that's just not something that we get into. Sometimes we do. With John was an exception. But we do a lot of consulting work, because we were working on imports previously, consulting to bring, you know, they don't know how to navigate. A lot of brands that want to come into the US market, they don't know how to navigate the US market.
Yeah,
so
right.
They don't even understand what TTB is. Like, they don't understand, you know, we had a brand we were talking with that was from, I won't say the country in case, you know, but literally the name of the brand, we're like, you can't even bring that brand in this country, like with that name. And they, like, the cultural difference, they couldn't even wrap their head around why. And we're like, no, like,
Yeah, it's like from the TTB to the three-tiered system to just the way the political climate is in the US is just a whole different animal from other countries, you know. So we get a lot of calls of people, like a lot of gins trying to get into the US that need formula approvals and stuff like that. And it's been interesting, because it's definitely not quite what I expected in terms of that. But I think the fun part's been we've worked off of, like Laura said, all referrals, but it's been people we've worked with in our previous life. So it's been fun to work with them in different roles, whether they're working on a new brand that, you know, they have some type of partnership with that they're bringing us into, or it's their own brand in some cases and they're doing their own thing. So that part's been a lot of fun, because it's been people we maybe haven't worked with in 10, 15 years that are kind of resurfacing in different ways.
Yeah, that is fun.
You, Jessie, I knew
you
we've known each other for 10 years at least now.
I was thinking about that this morning, you know, because we probably should kind of talk about how we connected. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's like almost 9 or 10 years now that we've known each other. And we kind of connected, I guess last March maybe. But Laura and I met in the military channel. She was representing Patron until the buyout happened. But, you know, we kept in touch and whatnot. And then I guess you saw the podcast and you were like my cheerleader. It was so awesome. And then we connected on that. And I just thank you so much for all your support.
I don't think you remember, but I remember having a conversation with you. I don't know where we were. We must have been in Maryland or somewhere. The picture still pops up sometimes where, I think it was in Virginia or somewhere. We were on the water. I don't remember where it was.
Oh, it was that little restaurant, that seafood restaurant. Yeah. We sat outside, the one on the island outside of Norfolk. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was Norfolk. And you were telling me of all the things you wanted to do one day, and you're still with the broker out there at the time. And I think that you might have mentioned this. And so when I saw you actually do it after, when did you start it, in quarantine or
I
right
started the
after?
first week of January of last year.
Okay. So, to see like move forward to do all that is exciting. I'm excited for you. And, obviously Lauren and I being female owned company and being in this industry for me, 30 years, Lauren, almost, that soon. She's younger than me. Um, so, it's so important to us to see other women succeed. Very, very important. So yeah, we are your cheerleader. We're happy for you.
Yeah.
When I think sharing like the stories of the people you interview and stuff too, like for other people to hear in the industry is cool because I think Laura and I talk about this all the time. Like people look at brands like Patron, Tito's, Fireball, like overnight success, right?
Right.
But a lot of these brands have been out for 20, 30 more years. But from a consumer's perspective, it looks like, it's new. And even from a brand perspective, we get a lot of like little startup brands that call us too. And they're like, our goal is to be at 50,000 cases in 5 years, but there's no like plan to get there and they want to sell the brand or whatever the case might be. And, I have to constantly be like, just so we're all on the same page, like, Tito's is like 25 years old, like this is how long it took. But I think a lot of people don't realize that.
No,
So it's cool when you're interviewing people with the different stories and people get to hear like really how these people started or the brand started or mixologists or
no,
whatever it is to get to like the root of how they got to where they are. Cause it's definitely not, it's rare that you see something that's truly like an overnight
no. When I
success.
worked for Southern, I was a sales rep, and I will definitely age myself at this point. But Tito's came to the GSM, and he was still like selling it like tiny little batches, like almost out of the back of his car, and like we were like, what? And that was probably like the late 90s, like so that's, and now look at it, it's just a monster. Same thing with Patron. When I started with Patron, there was maybe 10 salespeople in the whole country, and for a long time there was only 10 of us. And then they started adding people, but to watch the brand, like I started when it was like at 50,000 cases and watched it go to 300,000. It was just crazy, crazy. So, but
Yeah.
that brand actually, people thought it was an overnight success. I mean, I don't want to, I might be wrong on my dates now. I'd have to look back, but I'm pretty sure it was John Paul got involved in it in 1986. So is when he found it. So it was a long time making.
When you think about too, like the celebrity endorsements, I think it started in maybe mid to early 90s with Hennessy. But then
Mhm.
I feel like Patron was really the next one. And I could be remembering this completely wrong, but I just remember it
No,
being
I was having this
Usher.
conversation with my daughter the other night because of the Super Bowl. So they were asking me about that, and I was telling them stories of I met Usher in Atlanta. I was in charge of Georgia, but we had a philosophy in the beginning, and this is 100% true. They did not go out and try to find celebrity endorsements. John Paul was friends with a lot of people, obviously Dan Aykroyd, people like that. Clint Eastwood would put it in his movie. So there was a lot of people he was involved with because he had already had a very successful company. And down here in the beginning, it wasn't like the brand was making tons and tons of that. We were just dumping money and trying to find endorsements. It happened organically. People started
Right.
writing about it in songs. Then it crossed over to country western song, and that's the same thing with like tops. That's the way I get that feeling. It's so much fun because like even when we see something big happen, like they would send out. I remember at Patron every like couple weeks they would send out a list of all the new songs that it was in, or that when it crossed over from rap to country western, somebody wrote it. You were just like, oh, this is happening. Like this is happening. It's crazy. I mean,
And it was
it was all
organic. I
organic.
mean, it wasn't,
We made a
now
drink
it's like
in
a little
Latifah on her
forced.
birthday in Miami. We would drop. Little John was huge Patron drinker for until he got involved with getting paid for it. He was like, "Oh, I could get paid for this," but in cases to his concerts and his hotels in Miami. So it was all organic in the beginning, very very organic. I can't speak to later on what happened, but I don't want to get into that part because they may have gotten more involved in sponsorships after a while, but in the beginning it was all organic.
That's really cool.
I think the environment's a little
Yeah,
different now too. Like I
absolutely.
think that things that the big companies have paid for a lot of things over the last couple of years, and I think that's made it a little different, so it's harder for the little guys, where back in the day it was a
Yeah.
little bit easier to get like organic partnerships without having to pay tens of millions of dollars. And now you're seeing the celebrity brands even more where they're not like paid, let's say, sponsors. It's more they have equity in the brands and they're becoming part of it. And now a lot of them, that's the angle. And it doesn't, works for some, but it doesn't work for
Yeah.
everything. And obviously we've seen that explode in tequila more so than any of the other categories. Probably going back to what Laura's saying, like Patron was really the one that started it, but it's a little bit of a different,
It's always
philosophy nowadays.
wild for me to walk into liquor stores into a tequila set now. It's just like I get overwhelmed. I look like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because when it started, there was no tequila set. It's
You know,
very
I had a
few.
thought. Have you ever seen Sophia Coppola's Lost in Translation
Yes.
with Bill Murray, and how in Japanese culture it was cool to have celebrities do a commercial? And in the
Yeah.
US, it was
Yeah.
like, oh, you don't do
It is.
commercials. You don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
remember that.
And so just, I mean, maybe they had something to do with each other and they grew kind of towards that, because I mean, now the latest T-Mobile commercial I've seen, there's like 6 of them in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just one, 6.
Or the Dunkin' Donuts commercial.
Dunkin' Donuts.
It's just be flipped.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's, obviously technology's changed, things have changed, the access to information has changed.
Yep.
I'm not sure, like, look, I'm not, no one knows, right? Like, would everything have happened the same way had there been huge, like, social media back then, and had there been the all these different platforms for information? I don't know. It might have, it might not have. I just know that in that particular moment in time, everything was right. And, they obviously there was ex Seagram's guys involved who I respect, that were very, they knew what to do and they were good at hiring people. That was another thing. Patron was very good at hiring people. So they hired the right people that could do a lot of different things, because when you're running that lean, you have to be able to do everything. And Lauren and I encounter this a lot with brands that call us. Like, you can't just be a brand owner. You have to know every aspect. And John does. I will say that if he doesn't, he tries to learn, because it's really hard. And I've owned businesses outside of this industry, and you really have to know every part of it, because if you don't, there's going to be things that fall through the cracks or that get missed, and you have to be able to step in and jump in. And they were good at hiring people that could navigate different, from operations to marketing to sales, to jump on everything. And Lauren as well, we've been very cross trained in a lot of aspects, which has helped us tremendously,
Yeah, that's
because no one
amazing.
was.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. I think that's one of the things, one that makes us a little bit different, but I like that's a piece of advice I give to everyone is like if you have an
Yes.
opportunity to work in a different channel, go do it, because it might seem like a lateral move on a paper. Like if you're a regional manager, let's say in open states, and you're going to move and be a regional manager in control states, get over the title piece of
Yeah.
it and go do it for the experience, because most people get pigeonholed into a spot. Like if you're in Florida, you might have a region of 4 or 5 states, but you're still being tied to Florida, right? Specifically. Or if you're in control states, you get tied to that. I assume military is similar to that, and a lot of the basics of the business are the same. I always say to people, I started in open states before I clearly lost my mind and wanted to go in control states, but there's a lot of things I do different now managing an open state that I wouldn't have done had I not learned control states. Chains are very similar, to the way control states work. So I think there's a lot of crossover, but in the industry, people have always specialized in one thing, right? I in the mid Atlantic or in the Northeast or national accounts, but it's rare that you see people cross over. And I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's also important to the business because you need to understand how, like, if you're running national accounts but you've never managed an open state distributor, that is a
Yeah.
problem, right? Because you don't understand the lead time to like how the product is getting to the distributor and how does a single barrel get from there to there. And like there's just a lot of logistics that even if you're the salesperson in this channel, if you had worked in other elements, you'd understand the process a little bit different rather than just this one piece. So like I think it's really important because there's a lot that goes into all these channels, but they work together. And that's one of the things we say to people all the time. Like people call us and say we want help in military or cruise lines or one or national accounts, and we're like we don't take on business for one channel because
Oh,
it collectively has to work together.
we'll consult for you, but we don't get, actively involved because they cross over too much. I mean, when I was with Patron and the COO at the time, looking back now, I probably didn't give him enough credit for it at the time, but he forced me. He didn't force me, but he pushed me into. I was doing Florida, Georgia, Indiana. I know that's random, but it was the way we kind of tackled. And he was like, "I need you to go open the Caribbean. I need you to work on the Caribbean. I need you to do the cruise lines." And here, 20 years later, I always had one foot in international, one foot in domestic, so I got to see all of it. And it was, I can't, thank him enough for that, because that really enabled me to navigate. Especially, this is where you saw it happen a lot too. It was hard, was during the layoffs and quarantine, because people
Yeah,
had worked
yeah.
in one specific area for so long and never went out. And then quarantine, they furloughed so many people or they downsized. And then they were having a trouble applying for positions in other, channels, because they didn't have any experience in that channel. Where for myself, fortunately, I had always a foot in domestic, a foot in international operations to some extent, so I could just maneuver. Um, so I piece of advice: cross train. You got to cross train.
And I think nowadays too, the big companies are like with all the mergers and acquisitions, it's like limiting, right? So if you're working for startups and you don't have that reach of different roles and something happens, a brand gets bought by Pernod Ricard or whatever the case might be, it's hard to move because it's one person in a region and then it's 10 people basically fighting for the same job.
In my experience, and I haven't worked for as big a companies as you have, and maybe that's the key. But I haven't seen people be able to cross over and do all these different types of jobs. Now, if there was a startup like a Patron, but you get pigeonholed no matter what. Like I spent 8 or 9 years in the military. Well, no one will hire me outside of the gate because all my relationships don't matter to them, right? It's all about relationships now, and it's, to me, that's a really wouldn't say it's sad, but it's just kind of like I think they're
I
missing
agree.
out on really good talent just because whatever account management job you're doing, it's still account management. It's different people, it's different channels, there's different rules, there's different this, that, and the other, but it's still account management.
Yeah, and someone like yourself can learn other aspects. I mean, I've seen you manage, what you do, and you would be able to. But getting that opportunity, it's tough nowadays for sure.
To me, it's not as much about like if I'm looking to hire someone, it's not really as much about the current relationships. I have a different perspective. I've tried it all ways. Like, right, I've hired people with years of experience, and I thought that that would be better, especially in specific channels. I've tried it where I've hired people with no experience. And honestly, like somewhere in the middle is the best. I've always done better with people that it's the person, right? They have the
Yep.
work ethic. They want to learn more. I like an employee that doesn't want to just isn't suffice with doing their job. Like they want to learn other things, will willing to roll up their sleeves and get into other projects. But to me, it's not really about the relationships. Because here's the thing: that buyer can change tomorrow, and it doesn't
Nope.
matter. It's the ability to build the relationship that
Yeah.
is important, and doing the same things consistently. And that doesn't really, I mean, it's risky, right? And I think it depends on the size of your company, how much money you have to pay in a salary, and then what is the goal, right? If you're looking to just drop quick volume, yeah, you need the relationships because you're going to need to go in there and get whatever done. For Laura and I, we're looking to like actually build the brand long term. And it's not like we're not dropping 500 cases and walking away from it. Frankly, I don't want to chase those 500 cases next year. So I like to put it where we're going to get the 500 cases and then it's going to organically grow and not just drop the cases. And I think it's hard to find people, because some people interview well, but then they don't want to put in the work. It's really more about the work ethic and finding the right person that's willing to roll up their sleeves, honestly, because since COVID, a lot of people also don't want to leave their house. So that's been another challenge.
Yeah, it's a little different nowadays for sure. With that, things have changed.
Yeah,
I
people want
would
to work
say
from
there
home.
was, oh, for sure.
Yeah. And we're in sales, right? There's nothing that's going to replace walking in a bar or a liquor store with a sample bottle and talking to the
Yeah,
buyer. And there will never be a day that I don't like tout. I don't care what level you're in. You have to get out in the
yeah,
market because you have to hear it straight from the distributors are going to tell you their perception. So let me preface, like, they're not lying, but their perception of why the brand isn't selling or why people aren't picking it up. And, whatever that looks like. It's also different from a brand perspective. If I'm talking to the liquor store owner than the sales rep that they see every single week, trying to sell them hundreds of items. It's always interesting to me just to listen to what they say. And look, some of it's always not what you want to hear, especially when we were selling brands that aren't growing at 300% and they don't want to bring them in. It's a very different conversation than what we're seeing now.
right. No, for sure. I agree. I think one thing that people can, a piece of advice that I would give anyone that's at a company, large or small, since the crossover is you don't get that ability. Like Patron was very entrepreneurial, so like they were like good, they had no problem with everybody. We were blocking and tackling, but the times were different then. There's Lauren and I worked most recently for a division Sazerac that was very similar. It was ran lean. We blocked and tackled. Everybody helped out. Lauren and I, that's obviously we work together a lot. This is where this relationship stemmed from. But one thing I started doing there, and it was mostly because I was being asked by women a lot, mostly all women, was to take like, can I have an hour every other week just to talk to you, to ask you questions? So, sometimes they would have prepared questions to ask and we would run through. And sometimes it was about channel specific stuff. Sometimes it was about, how to navigate the industry or how, as a woman, or what should I do? I have kids. I'm trying to figure all this out. Where should I go from here? Um, so I think that applies to men and women, right? So if you can get an hour with somebody at a higher level, and most people are willing to do it, right? Like they're willing to give you that hour. Talk to them, call them up, ask them about other channels that you don't know about. At least it's a start, right? Like at least it'll start giving you an idea of how things work. And again, Lauren pointed that out with John earlier. She's very, I don't want you to get him flooded with calls and stuff now, but she's really great about that with people. And then it circles back a lot. So
I try to give people, like, I think everybody started somewhere, right? There was a day when I didn't know how to do a price structure and someone sat down in a room with me and taught me how to do it. And I think that that's important. Like, I started my career in the tasting agency side and I had I sold other things, right? But I didn't sell liquor, and someone gave me a chance. And I think it's important, like, to do the same thing back. But I think the work ethic's the big thing, is like finding the right people that are actually willing to put in the work, which is easier said than done.
So before we kind of jump into each of your journeys, I know you've both mentioned some previous jobs that you've had in different channels and whatnot. So, I'll let you kind of dictate the flow there. But one question before we do is, can you talk a little bit about how you formed your company and why you named it what you did?
all right. I'm like, where do we go, Laura? Who starts? Well, I'll say that probably about a year and a half ago. It was probably a year and a half ago. Lauren would tease me with this. She's like, "Do you ever think about going on your own?" And I'm like, "I have, and I have done. I had a consulting company, and I did consulting work on the side during quarantine. But for me, and Jessie, I'm a single parent. My husband died probably 12 years ago this summer. He, met him at Southern. That's a whole nother story. Um, I had to be very aware the last few years of, like, my travel and being present for my kids and things like that. And, they're at an age now where it works a little bit better, but to start your own company, it's hard. It's hard, right? Like, we're very fortunate that we had a lot of people poking us constantly. Like in our last position, like, when are you guys going to go out on your own? When are you guys going to go out on your own? So, she caught me on a good day and we were like, all right, I'm like, let's just do it.
I had a bad day and I caught her on a good one.
What are we waiting for?
So we decided we decided probably December of 2022 that, okay, we're going to do it. We kicked around several names before we came up with Brazen, but it just kind of fits, right? Like, we're looking for brands that are disruptive, brazen brands, brands that are want to, disrupt a category or maybe look at things a little differently, but also, as a woman in the industry, a lot of times you get told, tone it down or, be different. I think it's a lot better in this industry than it used to be. Obviously, it's been a long, and this is not something that isn't talked about in this industry. We're very small, comparatively, our percentage that we make up. But, we were like, we could either do what everybody says or we could just be brazen, and that's who we are. And like, we are very honest with people. There's no reason to not tell the truth to a client, even if they don't want to hear it. There's a lot of work that we turn down. We turn down a lot of work because if we don't feel like we can help them, or we're not on the same page, or as Lauren uses that phrase a lot, then it's not going to work for anybody. So that's kind of the short version of where brazen and being bold and just jumping off of cliffs came from. But
Nice. That's great. I love it. It matches you too.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say, yeah, I mean, the definition is bold and without shame. So when we were like looking for, different names, like we came across that and we were like that's the one. But, I know that I personally rub people the wrong way sometimes. I frankly don't care, because what we said and what we share is what it is, get. Right? Like, you might not want to hear it, but it's the reality, right? I'd rather tell someone that that's not going to work for your brand in this particular channel. This is why, and this is what we can do instead. But, we refuse to take money for people just to take it. So I think for us, that's the most important, right? Like, not everybody always likes the approach. However, we'd rather be honest and transparent with someone with what we feel the opportunities are. Look, we don't know everything, but at the end of the day, it's one of those, like, if your goal is to sell 50,000 cases in the next 3 years with no money, versus if you're saying you want to grow it at this rate, we just all have to be aligned. And then if we decide we are on the same page, is different. But I think from a brand perspective as well, we're looking for brand. Look, we don't want to sell another plain vodka that we're trying to compete. That it's hard to build those brands in that channel. It's not to say that it can't be done, but there has to be something unique and different now to stand out in the categories. I mean, we talked about going in the liquor store, the tequila set's blown up. You can barely get anything in a vodka set at this point. So it really has to be something that's unique and bold itself from a brand perspective to kind of fit into what we're doing. We like disruptive people as well as brands that are willing to, push the envelope and maybe do things a non-traditional way. Because I think that's the other thing, right? The industry's been the same for so long and people are doing things the same way. And I think that that's what's kind of made a lot of the brands stagnant, is they're just not willing to try new things. And it might not work, right? But it might. So we like to try things a different way, and it doesn't always go over well. But I think at the end of the day,
and that's fine.
Yeah.
And he that's the good part, is that we can have a conversation, an honest conversation, and we're not gonna dance on tables for him. We want it to be right. And so, we have very honest conversations. We have a lot of fun together too, and it's very fun. But we're not going to tell him something that just to tell him something, and we don't do that with anybody. So that's kind of the long version of how we came up with the name. But
I love it. It matches you so perfectly, because you guys are, you're badass. You're so badass. And once people, once we start going through your journey, I thought of this question: how did we get here? That's your journey. And for me, that's so important and so exciting, which is why I ask you your mentors. And these are really important key
Yeah,
moments in your
yeah.
life that helped you get to you guys being this badass team. I love it so much. You guys are so awesome. Sorry, I keep saying it. I'll stop.
No,
Um,
you're awesome. We
so
love
awesome.
it. Look,
It gets
we
me
were
so
having
excited.
before we started recording this morning. We were just shooting the shit. We were saying like sometimes people think that, but like, listen, we're like everybody else. There's moments where we're like breaking down. Fortunately, like Lauren and I never have a moment at the same time. It's either she's having a moment or I'm having a moment, so we can balance it out. But you know, like
We feel bad for anyone that catches us on the same
yeah.
day, but that hasn't happened yet.
We're not nobody's perfect, right? Like we're all human, and I do think a little bit, now that I'm approaching 52 and I look back, some of the things that I had to go through and some of the things I went through, and it was kind of by necessity in some ways, sometimes because of what happened to my on my personal journey. And I didn't understand it at the time, but man, sometimes you have to get knocked down. Like it has to take you all the way down for you to build yourself back up. Or, there was just this last role I took, in operations outside of my wheelhouse in a lot of ways. I mean, I knew how I could do it. I knew that there was a few pieces I was going to have to wrap my head around, and I knew that I had already done things like that before, where I jumped off a cliff into the unknown, and I knew I was going to be able to do it. But I at first I was like, why? I don't really. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I did it more to stay home with the children at the time. And now looking back, like that had to happen because
Yep.
everything that like Lauren and I are doing now, it involves all of that piece. So it is your journey. Like even if it doesn't at the time, you're not understanding why, it always comes to fruition later, why you did it or why it happened. I'm a big believer in fate.
We talk a lot about like everything happens for a
Mm-hmm.
reason, and I think I truly believe that too. And I think like obviously if we didn't work there, we would not have met. And so I think we look at it from like that perspective, but it's been fun.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Different than I think we thought originally, but definitely fun.
Well, and I think what makes you two so dynamic and so strong is exactly what we just talked about, all your different experiences in the industry and how you know a lot about a lot because you have
Yeah.
had those unique backgrounds and experiences. So you can help a lot of people navigate this industry from all aspects. So I think that makes you really a really strong team, and you don't cross over a lot in some cases, right? You have some channel specific over here and channel specific over here and
Yeah.
operations there, and that kind of skill set. So I think you're really set up for some great success, and I really look forward to watching it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Lauren, you said you started out uh in the tasting aspect of the business.
Yes. So I studied apparel merchandising, apparel and interior merchandising in East Carolina. It took me a minute to get out of there. And so when I graduated, I worked retail and I thought I wanted to, I had done an internship with White House Black Market. You can tell it's my favorite color. I only ever wear black, but I worked there for a long time and I thought that's like the direction that I wanted to go. And in college, I started to do like promotions on the side just for like extra money. And the agency that I worked for was actually a female-owned company out of Maryland. Angie Cossack was the owner, and I learned a lot from her actually in the very beginning. But she needed a manager. They managed Bacardi and Heineken, and then we did like about 130 or so events a week.
That's a lot.
In the state of Maryland. She didn't do Montgomery County in Maryland and a little bit in DC as well. And then now I think she does Virginia as well. But we did a lot of events. So I worked for her for a long time and ended up managing that segment of the business. So obviously through there, I met a lot of people that own brands. We did projects for William Grant. We did a lot of like special projects too. And then I got into a little bit of the sales side. And when I left there, I actually went to work for a small vodka company, Zier Vodka, actually. Laura sold it for a little while at Southern. Great owner, a really good brand. And he's actually based out of Miami for a few years. And then I went to work for Lecter, which was where I ended up at the end with 375 before they had left there. So at the time, Lecter, which was mainly Van Gogh vodka, it was Van Gogh Imports at the time, was the main brand. A lot of the management at the time were old Seagram's guys from back in the day. So RNDC backgrounds, I learned a lot from all of them, and it was a lot of fun. The company at the time, I think I was one of two females, and there was maybe 15 employees, so it was pretty small. It obviously changed significantly over the years. I started in open states. So I lived in Maryland. I ran the Mid Atlantic for the most part for a few years. Because I was based in Maryland and Total Wine was nearby from a corporate perspective, I got involved with Total Wine like at a pretty early part of my career from a national account perspective, just more so because I lived there and they were like, you can have Total Wine because it's right here. And then in turn, the same way, I ended up with Pennsylvania and Virginia because they're like, you can drive there. And Pennsylvania was my first kind of jumping into the control states, which I would not recommend now to someone as that being the first opportunity, but they're the hardest for sure. So it was good from an experience standpoint. Then I left actually for a little while. I went to work for some guys that had come from Bacardi that had a startup with a few different brands. And I went there for a while. And then the old CEO of 375 at the time asked me to come back. So I came back and I picked up some additional control states. And then by the time I left, I was running their single barrel program with the suppliers. And then I was overseeing national accounts on and off premise and then control states and had built out a team in those channels. So I've been kind of all over the place in terms of that. I personally was running on premise and off premise national accounts by myself for a little bit before we build a team out to do so. But I'm definitely one of those people that if there's something that needs to be done and there's no one volunteering, I'm like, I'll do it. And I think, that's the piece, right? A lot of people don't want to take on the extra work. And I would always like kind of volunteer for it a little bit early just to learn the different channels.
No,
so I always wanted to
awesome.
go off on my own. I also didn't want to do it by myself, and I hadn't necessarily met the right person to do so. Like a few people have come to me and wanted to start brands or start this or start that. And I kept thinking in my mind, like, yeah, but I'll be doing all the work and I'm not, it's a lot of work, so I need to find someone that it's the same speed as I am, which is easier said than done. But then I met Laura, obviously at 375, and I was like, all right, I think this is the right person.
Yeah. Well, you know when you know, right? You know when you know. And
yeah.
And you had a chance to work with each other, for a couple years, right? So it wasn't like you just dove into this blindly. It was very strategic.
Yeah.
No, and I think like it was knowing that she would be able to bring as much to the table as I would, that's big, right? Because I can't even tell you over the years how many times they get a call that's like, let me pick your brain. And that usually equates to me giving them information that they don't have, and it's like a lot of that happens. And I feel like it happens to women a lot. So for me, I wanted to make sure that if I opened a company with someone or went into business with someone, that they were going to bring as much to the table as I could potentially bring. And, that way we could really make a difference and round things out. And we want to help people, Jessie. Like that's our biggest, God, we get so many calls from brands that have gone down rabbit holes already in a wrong way. And, by that time it's kind of too late or, you can't pull back from some of the decision making because it's hard, right? Like it's hard to navigate this industry. And, we just want to help, we want to make sure the people we're working with that we can help.
And it's expensive, right? Like, they're spending a lot of money in terms of just like, it's expensive to do business in the US in general because of the way it's set up. And we talk to people a lot about that. And like, we don't want to waste people's money, but a lot of the time, by the time they are coming to us, they've already blown through, potentially millions of dollars. And it's hard to sometimes dig out of some of the, I'll say, commitments that they've previously made through bad advice a lot of the time, or they just didn't know. And I think one of the biggest things, like I always say, like we spend a lot of time like strategizing, and the strategy changes. Like it's not like today we might say one thing and then the business is going to shift and the strategy has to change again, but they need to have people need to look at a little farther out and plan a little bit better. And I would say my open state brain didn't rationalize that. I was like, I was living in like a 60-day window all the time. And then when you go into chains, it like pushes you out a year and you're getting farther and farther. And now we're talking about 5 years, 10 years, depending on the brand. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, don't make rash decisions, take a step back and look at it from, if I do this now. And I think women brains work a little bit more like this, right? Where we're like, and to the detriment and to the positive, that you think like, okay, if I do this, then these are the potential outcomes. So sometimes it's harder to make a quick decision, but I think that that's important, right? Is like planning ahead for what's going to happen next, because most people are just like reaction to everything that's happening instead of actually taking a step back and planning for the future. And I think that's what gets a lot of people in trouble.
So Laura, do you want to kind of talk about your journey and how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, I'll try not to. I'm like, man, I need a drink of water for this. It's
Take a drink,
a lot.
a water, have a little bit of your cocktail there.
Yeah, I
Get
have
comfortable.
A lot of beverages on me. Coffee, Bloody Mary, water. I don't know what that says about me in some kind of psychological test, but
You're on Thirsty Thursdays. It's okay.
Yeah,
that's what we do around here.
God. So to not to go back too far, but to go back to where it needs to go. I was working my way through college. I was bartending. I worked for Delta first, but that's a whole nother story. They helped pay for college because I didn't, at the time, I didn't have money for college. And there are still companies that will pay for college. So I worked for a part of Delta for a while. And then I was bartending my way through the rest of college. And after I got done with college, I was still bartending. And listen, it's the best career in the world. The days of bartending that I met some of the best people, had some of the best times. I'm still friends with those people. I mean, it's an amazing experience being in the hospitality industry. And it's so much fun, and it's so much craziness, and it's just a great thing. And I found myself after college that I was like, I still liked it. I didn't know what to do, and it's going to sound so dated for people nowadays, but it's more about, like, my daughter would be like, why would you say that? I wanted a business card. Like, I was like, I need a business card with my name on it that says I do something. And it was really could have went in either two directions, because I had customers at the bar that were friends with pharmaceutical industry people. It was the late 90s, super busy time for that. And there was a couple of Southern guys that would come in all the time. That was one of their accounts. They would sit at the bar. They would bring the district manager in, and they knew I was looking for a job. And they were like, why don't you just come work for us? Like, try it out. You're good at sales. You would probably enjoy it. 6 months I chased them to get this entry level sales job. Like,
Sounds about right.
I was roommating with the first regional Jägermeister rep at the time. So we had a Jägermeister machine in our house, Jägermeister POS everywhere. She was working with the Southern guys. She's like, just keep at it. Don't give up. I chased him down for 6 months. I finally got the sales route. And of course, all the reps dumped all their accounts they didn't want into my route before I started. So I almost quit twice when I was working for Southern, but I don't quit. So I stuck with it. And by the time I left Southern to go to Patron, it was in South Florida. I worked out of the Miami office. I had one of the top 3 routes in the
awesome
area. Yeah, I killed it. Winning everything, to the point Lauren and I were just at a show, and one of the reps that used to work with me was like, remember that time you left and came back and won stuff? Like, you were still winning stuff from previous months before you quit. I had TVs in my house, everything you could think of. That was like when the Captain Morgan used to do the coin chest. I used to get coins all the time. But during that time at Southern, towards the end, and I met a ton of great people there. I met my husband there. He was with Southern. The Seagram's guys had an office close by, so he knew them. And, they had a couple of the Seagram's guys had come over to form Patron. And I remember taking orders for Patron because one of our friends, Greg Cohen, who worked for Patron too, he didn't start with them when I did. I started in 2005, right when it was starting to take off. But he always asked me, like, he's like, did you know? And I'm like, no. But I also remember working at Southern and taking an order, like somebody would order a bottle of Patron, and then all of a sudden it was 4 bottles. Then all of a sudden it was 6 bottles. Then it was a case a week. Then it was 2 cases a week. And it was like, oh, there's something's happening here. And so they were forming, and I wanted to do more. I knew I wanted to go into the supplier side. I wanted to do more. So they, were like, come help us. And I think maybe like the 10th or 11th sales employee in the US. And I took on, a bunch of the open states. But again, like what Lauren talked about earlier, it was a small company. So we did a lot,
Yeah.
I did duty, I did Caribbean, I did military, cruise lines, national accounts. So I was very fortunate to be able to work in a lot of different capacities. The brand sold to Bacardi in 2018. And at that time, it was like almost 14 years later, it's something that you can't put into words, like what that was like. I mean, it was just crazy, crazy fun, exciting, stressful at times, to to build a brand like that is just unbelievable. The people I built it with and worked with, and I didn't build it by myself. Obviously, we had amazing people that worked there. It was part of history that I just can't put into words sometimes. But I didn't want to go right into another supplier role. I felt like it was like the end of something big in my life. I had spent my whole young adult life there, and I went through so many changes. My husband passed away when I was with them. They were amazing. My family, they've become like family. So
Yeah.
I went to work for a marketing agency that handle, a third party marketing agency. Cause again, another jump off a cliff. The guys at the agency were like, you could do it. Take the cruise lines. Like, it's different. You're going to be doing third party agency stuff. And it was very different, but it gave me the opportunity. I wanted to continue on with the cruise lines and work with those people. I've become very good friends with a lot of the buyers from the cruise lines. And for 2 years, I did that until quarantine. And then I ended up at the operations side with Lauren at Sazerac. I almost took a big sales job with a tequila company, but again, I like to jump off cliffs and I'm crazy. And I was like, it was 2021, and I was like, do I go work in operations and go do something that I am not 100% familiar with? It's not in my wheelhouse. There was times, that I would get up and like study stuff early in the morning with the TTB and compliance because I didn't know all of it. And I could have just took an easy sales job with a tequila company, and I didn't, because I was like, this is something I don't know. I don't know why yet, but it's going to be beneficial to me in the long run. I can work from home for a couple of years. So I did it from 2021. So Lauren and I formed the company, and man, it's been a crazy, crazy fun ride. It's so crazy and fun. But it was a big thing for me when Lauren approached me about this, is that we were going to have to try to start a way to help other women in this industry as well, because that is so important to me.
So
So
important.
important being through all of these different phases in this industry, and from the Southern days when I was one of like a very few women, and to where we are now. It's just, and we have so far to go as women in this industry. So that's really important to me, and I know we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but that's kind of my evolution, and I've been very blessed and fortunate despite everything with the careers that I've have.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know
you
if that.
kind of had a once in a lifetime opportunity with Patron. I mean, I know you didn't know that obviously at the beginning, and everybody's taking that chance to get that opportunity. But it's awesome too, like to think about the culture there and how it got so big so fast, but that never changed, and how close you all were. And my question to this also is, you said Patron, the organization got really good at hiring really good people. Do you have the formula of that success that they were using to hire the right people? Like, do you have any idea? Like,
Well,
what
I
the,
would say this, and I don't think this is a secret. So it's not like they would go take some of the best people from other companies. They were very good at working lean and writing. And John McDonnell was a big part of this, and Ed Brown. Obviously, writing. They took very good care of their people, like benefits packages, competitive bonuses, which now is pretty much known in the industry. Everybody knows they have very competitive bonus package. Um, just little things like, and like making it so people didn't, it was just exciting. Nobody wanted to leave, but they would go find, connections. They had connections. Obviously, they had been in the industry a long time, and they would go take people from other companies that were really, really good, and they were, good at selling them on what we were doing, what we were accomplishing here. We were making history. And I don't want to say there'll never be another brand like that. There definitely are, opportunities for other brands to become like that, but I don't know that it would be built in the same way. But again, it goes back to, like, I bring it back to tops, and I know Lauren and John probably get sick of me saying, like, I know I've been through this before. It's very similar, but it is like, this is like very similar in a lot of ways, and the excitement that you get when you talk to the distributor about tops, and just the potential, and the camaraderie. So yeah, I think they did have a recipe. I don't think it's mine to divulge all of it, but I mean, we were very good about going and finding the best people that could do a lot of different positions, and that was huge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you are treated like a human and not a number, because that tends to happen sometimes, you're always replaceable, and it sounds like that's not how you were treated in that company. They were more of family, right? So like that's completely different. And then if they're paying you, extra bonuses on top of that, like what more could you ever ask for? Right? If you're cross training and you're making, a living, and you're loving what you're doing, and it's a family, like, in,
Yeah.
experience, that's pretty awesome.
Well, and I think one big thing, and Lauren and I both talked about this because this has been missing at other maybe companies we've worked at before. Everybody worked together as a machine. Like, everybody worked together. Like, we had one goal, like, and one thing, like, so if one market fell behind for whatever reason, it could be that they had bad weather. That, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but everybody worked to the same goal. Like, there was no me, there was no my territory, there was no anything. We were all working to drive the machine forward, and that was very important because a lot of companies don't operate like that anymore, and that, I
Nope.
think, was a huge part of success as well.
Cover your ass emails, right?
Yeah,
That's the
Yeah,
environment.
I
yeah, we were all working towards success in history, and that was it. That was it.
So cool.
and I think that's the key, right, to being successful is like if everybody is not working towards the same goal, it's not going
Right.
to work. And it's frustrating for the people that are carrying the weight and pushing it forward when the rest of it's not. And I think like that's one of the biggest things. I mean, and that's why, like, to go back to tops, like we're consistently, we don't always all agree, but and then some things Laura and I are like, this maybe isn't the right thing, but we're going to just do it anyway because let's see how it goes, And I think it's one of those things. It's like being able to see where the other person's coming from and make adjustments as you go, I think is important.
And being very entrepreneurial, that was huge with Patron. They were very entrepreneurial. They were willing to try stuff. They you know they just that spirit is what I was always like worried I wouldn't find again after it ended, is that you wouldn't be able to find that entrepreneurial, like, just, you gotta like see what happens, like, within parameters, and try things and break boundaries. And I'm very, very fortunate to be experiencing it twice in this industry, so I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think about it too, Laura. Like, if Patron hadn't sold, would you still be there? I mean, you wouldn't have had these two other career experiences to help kind of build those gaps, right? To help you be even more valuable to brands now.
Yeah, and listen, it was hard when it sold. Like, it was like getting a divorce or something. Like, people were just like,
Yeah.
we weren't, you know, in retrospect, I could understand why they sold it. So I get it now looking back, but it wasn't like, they didn't like just spring it on us, but they also, you never would have been ready for it, right? Like, you just never would have been ready for it. Um, but I would not have. No, I mean, I probably would still be with them, and I don't know that I would never met Lauren. I would have never branched out into these other areas. And a lot of people that I have met along these last, 5 or 6 years, whatever it's been now. And, again, that goes back to like, everything happens for a reason, even the bad stuff. It just, you got to build off of it and kind of look back. It's easier when you're in it. It's hard to see it, but later on, you do look back. Even Lauren and I are very close, and I know some of the things that she's experienced, and it's been hard for her. But in some ways, and some of the things that happen in the industry, and without taking her story away from her, but I can safely say I think you've looked back now and see like, oh yeah, I know I know what I learned from that, like for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was days where I was like, I don't know that I want to sell liquor anymore.
I wouldn't let her do. Even before we start the company, I'm like, no, because we need more women like you in this industry. We don't need women leaving the industry. We need more women in this industry, like taking
Well,
positions and
exactly.
driving.
And then you guys starting a women-owned business, and you want to really help. I mean, you're going to help brands and people, but you have this other mission that we'll get to soon about really helping women, and I can't wait to get to that. But I think we'll end on that because we'll talk about our little exciting Women's International Happy Hour coming up.
Yes.
So that's exciting. But we
don't have
still
to-
have more to learn
I
about
always
you two.
wanna-
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's do it. It's gonna be so fun. It's like I love talking to you two so much. I don't want it to end, but I have something to look forward to. So that's really fun.
Yeah,
We're excited.
sure. That's
So
gonna be
Lauren,
exciting.
do you have any key mentors that you want to mention?
So I would say that there's probably two people specifically that impacted my career the most. One being Angela Kosick from Mad Events. I think I like laugh because I was like, 22 right out of college, like learning how to draft a professional email, and maybe wasn't the most political back then, for sure I wasn't. And she was really good at, and coming from the agency side where it was pretty much all women, but we were dealing with the distributors that were pretty much all men at the time. It was challenging sometimes to get things done. I think, like, from an organization standpoint down to planning, and just the communication sometimes didn't always go well. So I learned a lot from her, mainly how to start a paper trail to make sure you're covering like that. I did tell you that, and I would say like that's one of the big things. And then Norman Bonchek, who was the original CEO at 375, which was Van Gogh Imports at the time, along with Steve Ackerman, who was my first boss on this side. I think I had probably the most impact. Both were ex Seagram's guys that have been in the business for a long time and shared, the Seagram's like sales 101 manuals with me, and, took the time to actually sit down and teach me things. But I think the biggest thing was they were also always supportive. Like if I had a distributor issue, Norman was on the plane tomorrow to come in and sit down with the head of the house, and like with us in tow. And I think to have supportive managers like that in the beginning, especially when there wasn't a lot of women and I was really young then, with really not the right experience to do the role that I was doing, and they were willing to, sit down and support that. I mean, I think I've come across a lot of like great people in the industry over the years, both female and male, but those two probably have like the biggest impact of the way that I am today.
Awesome. Laura?
So I feel like I talked a lot about the Patron people. Obviously, they were very, very impactful in my careers. John McDonald, Ed Brown. So I'm going to take it back to International Women's Day, and touch on a few women, a couple in the industry and one outside. But Donna Frederick and Lori Welsh. Donna Frederick is retired now. She used to be with Jim Beam, and Lori with Constellations. Not just because of their class and like the way they handle themselves in the industry, and just their experience and their relationships. I could gush over them for hours. But, also the way that as women, they took me in like the sense that after my husband passed away, and some of the first trips I had to go on were national accounts trips, and my husband died suddenly, and they were just so supportive and so care, and still to this day they're like massive cheerleaders for me, like anything that I do, and they are rock stars in their own right. So like, if you're not familiar with them, look them up because there's some good people. But just, everything about them, I can't say enough good things about
Nice.
them, and just great. And well, huge resources for knowledge in this industry. They do great things. And then, obviously, oh God, say my mom, she passed away last summer, but that woman, man, looking back, she's the reason that I work the way I do. Like, she had 3 jobs, like, just always hustling on the go, everything. So there's been some very impactful men, but definitely some very impactful women in my life. And, I hope to leave the same that's a big thing for Lauren and I, to leave the same for other
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about work-life balance, Laura?
You could do a whole session on just that I used to get asked that a lot on the 1
Well, do you
hours.
want to maybe talk about that on the happy hour?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about that on the happy hour,
We're
because
going to leave people in
that
suspense.
yeah, and that's a topic.
It's hard.
Lauren and I have this conversation personally between the two of us. We have to check each other sometimes, but also we get that from a lot of women.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't do it.
I don't do that at all. Not right now.
It's hard.
I'm not good at it either. So it's hard. You have to consciously think about it.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get into it on the happy hour.
Yeah.
Because it does, I think we make it look on the outside like it's super, just like flows, it's easy. But there's a lot of things we have to do personally on the back end to make sure that happens. And mistakes, like, right? Like I've made mistakes with it before, and I refuse to do that again. So
Yeah, I agree.
we can talk. That'll be a good one to
Yeah.
talk about on the happy
Yeah, I
hour.
agree. I mean, you can't get that time back, right? So, but you can change behavior and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that'll be a really good hot topic for us to discuss. So, from the Brazen Imports perspective of what you all are building, are there any main pain points that you kind of want to point out? I mean, we all kind of know there's a lot of brands, and the distributors are too big and they can't keep people and whatnot. But do you want to talk about that, or do you want to? Is there any movement to fix that, or is there other options out there, or are there other pain points that you're seeing that you want to point out?
Sure. I mean, this could be like a whole podcast in
It's a loaded
itself. It's a
question.
lot, but I think for me, for brand owners, one of the big things for me in this industry, that's why I hate even using the term consultant. Sometimes is a loaded gun. I feel like lately, like I don't even like to use it with ourselves, because it's a lot of consultants in this industry, and I feel like for me a big pain point is, if you're a brand owner, you, like Lauren and I have boxes that forms boxes that people have to check before we have conversations with them. Like, we need to understand some more things. So it breaks my heart when we get brand owners on the phone and they dump their hearts, souls, everything into their dream, and they may have like gone down a road they can't pull back from now, or something to that effect. So I think for me a big pain point is I would love to see them, maybe like ask more questions, or like, do yourself some due diligence, and research the people you're getting involved with. Ask some questions. Look at where you ask yourself, where are you going to, we ask this question the first 2 minutes of a call. What do you want to do in 5 years with this brand? Like, where do you see yourself? Like, what is the goal here? So, I mean, ask yourself that before you get involved on a big, or you get too excited, because you get excited, right? Like, that's a big
Right.
thing, and I get it. It's exciting, but ask yourself, like, what is my goal here? Because I think that will help you make decisions, and kind of guide you a little bit better. So that's one for me, Lauren. I'm sure you have others that are different.
I'll kind of add to that, because I think, look, everybody always says the same thing, right? Like, one of the main point is managing the distributors. Well, it's really not as much about the distributor, right? Because it's like a necessary evil. You have to
And
have
I
a
work for
distributor
a distributor, so
legally.
I've been on both sides. I've been a salesperson and on the supplier side. So, it's, you guys, we see their side of it a lot too.
100%.
And I was going to say, And I don't know that I believe, like, I would say if you asked me this question 6 months ago, I might have been like, the distributors is probably the biggest pain point. I don't feel that way today. I think probably the biggest pain point goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It all starts at the brand, right? If you aren't going into the distributor with, like, we ask them for a 5-year plan, you have to show that to the distributor too, like, right? Why should they believe in this? Why should they help you grow it? What's that investment look like? And what are you doing? I think it goes back to kind of taking the step back and having a plan for your own brand, because I think that's where it goes sideways, right? You go to a consultant, they give you some advice based on the knowledge, the limited knowledge that they have in whatever capacity. Some decisions get made, and then you end up here 3 years later that maybe some of these decisions that you made, again, it's, if I make this decision, what happens next, and I think a lot of it ends up at the distributor level, because they start just taking any distributor that they can get because it feels like the right thing to do, or they get an introduction from their friend and they can get into Georgia, which Laura and I are big, like, don't go into franchise states. I'll say that now, free advice. Don't go into franchise states too early, because you can't change that decision later. It's not that easy. And I think a lot of it comes back to the brand. Like, I think to Laura's point, like, vet the people you're working with, have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan of where you want to get the brand and how you want to go there. And then align with people that want to have the same objectives as you. And I think there's no difference, like, when we look at a brand from a larger perspective than when they look at it from a statewide perspective and find the right partners. I think, while the distributors are a pain point, when you don't know how to manage the distributors and provide them with the proper data, to support it. I think one of the pain points that I have is, this is a generic thing, is there's no like central unified data, right? So when you go to like do a national account RFP, like, and this has been a topic at Vibe and several conferences over the years, like, there's no one like aligning from a supplier standpoint, pricing and distributors by market. There's no like systems for that. And I do think our industry is a little antiquated in terms of the systems. Like, there's all this technology out there, and I think it's getting better, right? You're starting to see e-commerce come into play and the distributor systems, whether it's Southern RNDC, what they're doing in a data standpoint. There's some great systems coming out now, but we're definitely behind as an industry of the technology side of the business. And I think there's an opportunity for that. To me, that's one of the biggest pain points, right? We have all these little distributors. Not everyone reports into VIP. How do you collect the data? And then, there's small startup brands that don't have the money to pay for VIP right out of the gate. So what's the easiest way? I think that's the hardest part for a new brand, is like, how do you wrap your head around some of that? And just because we're so far behind in a technology standpoint, I mean, look at the control states. A lot of the systems haven't been updated for years at the state level. So it's hard to work in those systems because it's not as easy as it should be. And I think it makes it a little harder to work through for a small brand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That really is a hard part. Data, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And knowing how to read that data, small supplier, like,
and that also,
and it costs a lot, right?
Yeah, but I think it also, is data that is information that people can use to make sure they're building the right brand. Like, is there a real fit for this? Is there a real need for this? Like you said, Bach is tough, right? You got to be really unique. Like, Jason Momoa, right? He and his partner have Melee Vodka. That story is great. Like, whoever did the marketing, I'm so in. Like, I can't wait to try it now. You got to have that compelling story in order to really make an impact on certain brands. I mean, he's a celebrity that works too. I mean, let's be honest, right? People really like him. But if he has the quality product to back it, then great. I mean, The Rock is the same way, right? They wanted to price his bottle $20 higher. And he said, I'm the tequila for the people. No, it has to be, 29 and 31. So, the quality's in the bottle, right? That's story. And his daughter's initials are on the bottom of the bottle. Like, there's a whole thing to it. So if you're unique like that, even being a celebrity, you still have to get the product right. Because we've seen it, like we've talked about before.
You have to have the story, and like, we get a lot of calls where people like, I have the best gin, I have the best tequila, I have, well, everybody. And the distributor gets that even more, 10 times larger than we do. So you have to have more than just believe you. I truly believe you believe your brand is the best, and it might be, but you have to have more than that. Like you have to know what your story is, how you're going to go to market. Like there's a lot more to it. So, for me, that's a lot of it is helping them make the right decisions ahead of time. So, or vetting stuff for themselves. And then the data is we love data. Laura and I love data. So we look at a lot of it.
You'd be surprised too, like some of the basic things we ask people for. But in the beginning, and Laura and I always kind of laugh because she's like, "They're probably not going to have this." So I was like, "Yeah, I know. Well, let's just see what they say." And I like, ask them for stuff, and like even does, and it's that a lot. They don't know they need, or they have a brand deck, but there's really nothing meaningful in it, right? So we're like, okay, you need to add this to support that, and like but people don't know where to start, right? If you have a brand and you've somehow stumbled into whatever you're in, and then every now and then, like a brand like Tops, it actually takes off kind of on its own. And it's like, how do you get things in order when it's already going like that? In other cases, it's they sold 2,000 cases. They're in 2 states, and they're trying to figure it out still. So it's interesting. I definitely think there's so much out there, but it's not necessarily all accurate either, right? There's information out there, there's consultants, there's different people, there's different distributors. But, like we talk about national accounts a lot. People come to us for national accounts, but I'm like, well, you're in 3 states. Right. Like we should expand your network first. And then this is like a 5-year plan from today when you do XYZ first, and you're not in the right states for chains, and then everything's piecemealed. So I think that's one of the biggest problems is like every state has different regulations. Yeah. The control states are a different animal. The processes for national accounts are different. So when you're a new brand, and it sounds good, like I think we talked about this before with you, Jess, like getting into Walmart sounds like a good idea, but there's a lot of pieces before you're in hundreds of Walmarts all over the country. So I think it's, again, taking like the step back to go forward. But I think the information and the legal piece of it is what makes it a lot more challenging in the US.
And I think people misunderstand the investment, because if you think you want to get into Walmart, you got to have a lot of money to produce the amount of cases they're going to need. And that's a whole piece to itself.
Well, and do you want to be
suppliers all the time? We're like, okay, so we could get you in chains. Are you going to be able to produce? You know what the fill is to like, and they don't understand the magnitude of
and the timelines.
Like they've talked to like maybe somebody before us, and they're like, well, we'll get you on the chains. We'll do this. And like Lauren does a lot of work with the chains, obviously, more than I've done in the last 5 years. But like getting into some of the chains is not hard. It's not, you can get into a chain. It's getting the pull through in the chain so you don't get, it's the same thing with the military dress. You don't get delisted, because then once you get out of there, like you can't get back in again. It's kind of hard. Cruise lines are the same way in a lot of respects. So
and the control states for that. We say that all the time. I'm like, look, there's one thing to get in the chains. It's another thing to stay in the chains. And it's a lot of money. And then I also don't think, I'm not picking on Walmart at the moment, but like, not every brand belongs in every chain either. So maybe you don't have a brand that's right for Walmart, or whatever the other chain would be, Costco for that matter. Like they have specific things they're looking for. And I think like, that's the thing. It's like, while there's a lot of stores and you can get a lot of volume, I think it's also, again, goes back to what is your brand identity? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And aligning with the right partner accounts that get you there, whether it's a chain or a national account on premise or a restaurant group regionally, whatever that looks like. I think it's just, again, people like rush to get these drops of volume, but then it's not sustainable a year from now. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like we won't touch something that we don't think is long-term sustainable growth. If it's been a lot of like drop, not to say we can't fix some of that, because we've done that too.
Sales, it's false sales, and then they're chasing those sales constantly. It's a problem.
It's hard to get away. It's like bad behavior, and it's hard to get out of that, because you're going to have a massive like volume drop to get out of it before then you can move forward. And that's what I think is hard. And some brands can't afford the volume drop because of whatever commitments they have.
Yeah.
We actually developed a different strategy for Tops this year that we will not share because it's
top secret.
Top
secret.
I like that.
Again, more. Then we'll talk about it later. But we have a strategy.
Well, I get to have you on again.
Yes, you will. Definitely.
So let's move over to your outlook for the remainder of the year. What do you guys think is What do you want to talk about? Like, do you want to talk about your organization that you're building? Do you
Yeah,
want to talk about the industry? I mean, we've talked quite a bit already about the industry.
yeah.
I'll leave that up
No,
to you ladies.
well, we could talk more about the industry on the happy hour too.
Yeah, true.
There's so much going on with trends right now. It'll keep unfolding. I mean, I definitely like this, go back to the pain point question because this could segue into it easily. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of big pain point for Lauren and I. We've experienced a lot of them over the years as women in this industry. So, one of the big things for me, and it was, and for Lauren as well, was to be able to start Brazen Trails, our foundation to help other women in this industry. Whether it's, we have a lot, obviously Lauren and I have a lot of combined resources, and we would like to be able to, help other female distillers, other female entrepreneurs, other females in this industry, whether it's just like helping them write a resume, like anything, like to just kind of push this initiative forward for women in this industry because it's so important, right? And outside of the industry as well, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and like we tell her stories, and she's just like can't fathom, like they don't have glass ceilings. This next generation, they don't, it's just different. And she's been doing a little research, intern work for us, and stuff like that. So it's fun to see this next generation, but we have a long way to out. All industries have more work they can do, but our industry needs a lot. So we want to be a resource, and this foundation will help women. We not that men, we can't help men too, but we will be specifically looking for female uh, females to help. You want to add to that, Lauren?
No, I mean, I think that's a good summary. I think the main thing for us is like, like we talked about earlier, people have all different needs, right? Like some brands are coming to us because they need help, like they need to try to sell a certain amount of cases for whatever reason, right? Or they want a specific channel. And I think the biggest thing is how can we help some women own brands before they get too far down the path, right? Like, is it reviewing contracts before they sign a deal with one of the big companies and just making sure that they don't get burned? So we're going to basically donate some of our time and then utilize some of our other resources, and whether it's PR, marketing, and yeah, to help some brands and give them, like almost like a period of time. So we'll have a few brands each year that we'll be able to support and donate some of our time to help them with whatever they need, right? Whether it's compliance help or pricing strategies or a brand strategy in general. And I mean, we've sat on calls with, several different brands, and female and male, where people feel kind of stuck, and, we feel bad. And then we're like, all right, we want to do something to help people that, can't get out of the hole that they got into for whatever reason, or just starting out and don't want to make some of those
Or
decisions
just need a
too.
sounding board too, right? Like, yeah, or some women. I know we talked about it. We were all on that last call, and there was the female collective, and there was 100 amazing women on there, and something that just stuck out was that one lady that said like and I'm paraphrasing this, so I might not have it exactly correct, but that women don't become CEOs in our industry, COOs. They're not unless they start their own company. And I
Yep.
like, oh, it crushed me, right? Like I hate hearing that. And she almost sounded a little defeated. And like we just want to be able to give whatever kind of head start we can to some of these women, and get them going. So that's they can contact there's a tab. By the time this comes out, there'll be a contact on our page where they can submit to look. We can't get to everybody, Lauren and I would love to, but we'll review, and we'll make some decisions. We have our first one through you, Jessie, which
Yay.
we decided we're going to wait to talk about it a little bit, but maybe on the happy hour call. But we have our first female that we can't wait to dive into her
Yes.
company and help.
More suspense
Yeah, she's
for the
amazing.
happy hour.
Yeah.
We love her.
Yes.
So
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
go to our website and get more information on Brazen Trails.
You want to talk about what that website is?
Yes, it's www.brazenimports.com, and then there'll be a tab where they can go, click on the Brazen Trails to get to the foundation, where they can submit some forms.
That is super awesome. Thank you, ladies, for seeing the need and being able to take time out of your professional and personal lives to help other people. I mean, I know, Laura, you mentioned other women in your life kind of taking an hour here and an hour there. So this is your way to give back in a really impactful and formidable way. That sounds like it's not necessarily just a call here and a call there. It's a little bit more structured, which is pretty awesome. So I can't wait to see how things go with that and the kind of people you're able to help. So would love to keep in touch with you for the Thirsty Thursdays format and keep everybody updated on your progress, because I think that's super important. So, yeah, thank
definitely.
you.
Hopefully by the happy hour, you want to, I don't know when the happy hour, we'll have more information too. Maybe we'll have a little toast to the new person.
Well, should we talk about it and then end on our rapid fire question time?
Yeah. I'm a little scared of the rapid fire. Let's go.
Yeah.
So all of us talking about, Laura and Lauren giving back to women, they've helped me too. We had a call before this, and I'm doing the best I can with this podcast and starting other businesses. And so, I made the comment, well, I'm doing everything I can on my own. My brother-in-law is helping me edit, which, they could take 6 to 8 hours and as perfectionist as I get about it, because it's my name out there. Sometimes I can fix it, sometimes I can't, but it's taking time away from other things, but I love this so much. I'm never going to stop. And I think the feedback that I'm getting is that it is impactful to other people to hear other people's stories and the people that have impacted their lives. It is my favorite thing. I love hearing it. I get excited every time. And so they reflected on what's going on with the podcast, and we've come up with a couple of really cool ideas, one being the happy hour. So in honor of International Women's Day, as we talked about at the beginning, we are going to have a happy hour with the three of us, and we're going to have a link for the audience to call in and ask questions. So I know that we talked earlier about, we're going to talk about work-life balance, and then maybe some more pain points, and maybe just advice for people that are starting off brands. Maybe they're in a dilemma. Do I go left or do I go right? And they can call in and ask you some questions, which, again, thank you so much for donating your time to Thursday Thursdays and our listeners. But also I've been struggling with the last question to ask, like, what would you do with $1 million? That one was pretty fun. And then, getting to know people, like, what are your passions, or what do you do outside of work? But I really wanted to have something that said a little bit more, it ended it a little bit more exciting. And the only podcast that I've listened to that really was kind of doing what I was thinking was, what's your favorite swear word and why? Well, I don't really want to do that one. I want it to be a little bit more dynamic than that. And so these ladies, I can't remember if it was both you or Lauren. I apologize. I think it's Laura. Came up with rapid fire questions, because that killed two birds with one stone. We got to end really in a really fun place, and then we also get to use it as reels, right, for the upcoming segment. So you get to kind of know these ladies a little bit before you listen to their podcast. So I think it was a really, really smart way, and I think it's going to add a lot of value. So for that, I thank you both so much for that. And then, did we talk about the happy hour? Or did I just talk about the rapid?
About that.
Did I flub that? Okay. So the happy hour.
No. We might be like, man, that was another one of our really bad good ideas.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked about it. Because it's fun and it's spontaneous. Yeah. And they're not serious questions. They're just they're just fun. And so the other aspect that these ladies, so we mentioned happy hour throughout this podcast. So on the regular happy hour for Thirsty Thursdays, which is the third Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to have a happy hour in honor of International Women's Day. So the three of us will be on, and we'll have a audience link for people to call in, and so it'll be really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Open to everybody.
We're excited.
Lauren and I we're very fun when we drink. So
Yes, you bring your own cocktail. BYOC.
Yeah. Or if you
Yeah.
got one that you want us to try, make a suggestion. So we'll
Yeah,
try
that's
it.
true. If you want to
Yeah.
send us,
In your guide.
a recipe or a brand, let us know. We'll try it.
For sure.
That'll be fun. That'll
Yeah.
be really
Yeah,
fun.
it will be. I'm looking forward to it.
So I guess with that, if you do have any brands you want to talk about and or cocktails or questions, if you want to send them ahead of time, reach out to me and we'll make sure that I get the questions to you all.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Perfect.
All right, so are we ready for rapid fire question time? I think I need to fix that name, but
Hold on, hold on. All right.
Laura had to take a drink.
Let's do it.
Okay. I am going to ask each of the ladies 3 random questions, and they have to answer within 10 seconds.
Oh boy. Lauren goes first.
Lauren goes first.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
If you were a cocktail, what would you be and why?
A dirty martini because I'm straight and get to the point.
Maybe we should do
I like
next time,
that.
like the newlywed game where I should answer your question.
I've answered that question. That's actually one of my favorite interview questions when I interview people. So I have that
I would
answer
have
down
pegged you
pat.
for that anyways.
Yeah.
What movie?
Like no nonsense, just right to the point.
I like it. No, that's good. What movie do you enjoy quoting the most?
Me? Oh, you're still talking to
Yes.
me, right? Okay, Step Brothers, probably. Not on purpose. It just ends up coming out of my mouth.
Anything in particular?
That's a good one too.
Yeah, did we just become best friends?
Yeah. You do say that a lot. That's so great.
Just become
I
best
will tell
friends.
you next time my favorite line from that movie. I don't want to say it on here, but my son thinks it's
Yeah.
hysterical.
Okay. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, I don't sing karaoke.
But you should. I've seen you.
But I've made it
That's
this
it?
whole time of
Really?
39 years of my life, and I've never done karaoke despite an entire, on a work trip in Scotland, I still made it out by being the videographer and did not do
Okay.
it. So at this point in my life, I don't think you'll ever catch me.
I have another one.
I did it Saturday night with you, and we weren't even at a karaoke bar, and nobody was doing karaoke. I was just doing it on my
Yeah.
Miller Lite bottle. So it was like,
I'm not that much fun. I like draw the line somewhere. I prefer like a dive bar in the corner as opposed to a karaoke bar. But
Well, how about
we gotta
another
get her
question?
to karaoke class.
Yeah, we do. Mission accepted. What are
I don't know.
the least likely 3 words someone would use to describe you?
Oh God. This is a good one.
It is a good one.
I would say the least likely terms probably to describe me would be like easygoing. However, I think I have a perception that is different than my reality. I have kind of like 2 sides of my life. Like my personal life is very different than my work side of my life. But I think if you ask someone at work, like I would not be described as easygoing.
There's 3. You got to pick 3 words.
Yeah.
Oh, 3. Lazy would be another one that I would not be called.
That is not something we would discuss.
And let me
We'll
think.
do this newlywed style next time, Jessie.
Okay. I think.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say maybe Laura needs to finish it for you.
Disorganized is probably the other one.
Good. That's the answer for sure.
Yeah, that was a good one. That's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Laura?
I am ready.
All right. If you were a cocktail, what cocktail would you be and why?
So I was gonna say the martini too. I was gonna say a dirty martini. I was gonna say because I'm very straightforward, but I can go a little off the Richter scale sometimes. So maybe a little dirty. Not dirty in that way, but like maybe singing Janis Joplin with a Miller Lite bottle kind of dirty. No. So that would I guess maybe a Tops pickle martini. I'll just do a shameless plug for Tops again.
Go for it. It's yummy. It really, I mean, it surprised
I used to
me.
be tequila. I used to think that my sweat was 110 proof at all times from the Patron over the years. So I've gotten a little bit. It was like coming out of Patron was like coming out of like like all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's all these, there's bourbons, there's this, there's that. So I've kind of expanded my horizons in the last, after drinking tequila for so many years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, whenever we'd go out, it was always tequila, which I love. So, next question. What is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, that's a good one. I do like to watch some Netflix. I'm trying to think what shows. Um, God, that's a good one. I probably have a lot of them, but not a lot of time to indulge all of them.
It's also public. You don't want to share
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm not sure. I think probably you know what? I do love muscle cars and like driving cars and like, so I would say my guilty pleasure is getting in my Bronco or getting in and telling the kids I have to go to the grocery store and then just leaving for a couple hours and driving around.
That's awesome. I did not know that about you.
I love me some trucks and muscle cars.
That's awesome.
John Wick too. That's another guilty pleasure. I watch those movies a lot.
My wife loves those.
Oh, the best. Love it.
Yeah, except for the dog. The dog part is very sad.
Yeah, but that's kind of what gets him going. Keanu Reeves is like the perfect mix of assassin and like boyfriend, husband, like all of that. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the third question is, what is your favorite pun?
Okay, so we talked about, I can't believe, Lauren, you didn't think. Everything's a big deal. Everything's. I was going to say. I use this all the time now, wherever we can. I'm like, that's a big deal. Like, I mean, because
between that and we're in a little bit of a pickle.
What was the other one?
Well, we're in a little bit of a pickle. I feel like I say that now.
There's so many, right? Like, are you being salty? Like,
we're into pickle puns now.
Into pickle puns big time. So, when she said she couldn't think of one earlier, I was like, oh man, we use one every day.
Like my Christmas card, it's a delightful holiday.
It's a delightful holiday. Yeah, we're on that kick right now. So
that's great. Getting into it.
We should do the format where I answer hers next time and she answers mine.
Yeah. I think we should. That would be really fun.
We'll be a little more randy next time. It was your first one, so we didn't want to go off the
this is great. I mean,
I didn't use one curse word.
I know.
Yeah, curse words. They're like they flew off my mouth too easy, so I didn't know.
Well, it's mostly industry people, other owners and startups that are very okay with it. It's not made for children, so we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Italian and I'm from Jersey, so I mean, it's like that's just part of your vocabulary. It's kind of hard. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, ladies, you guys are a team. You're a force to be reckoned with.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is my pleasure to help tell your stories to as many people as we can, and you're so generous with your time with the happy hour to. Talk to other women in honor of International Women's Month, really, right? Day and month. So
yes.
Super exciting. And I look forward to, following your progress and working with you both. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to see this brand go. It's already going, but like explode.
I know. We know what you mean. We're looking forward to it too. Thank you so much. We love you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're excited for the happy hour.
Yes.
All right. Me too.
Okay.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your week and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
You too.
Bye. This week's episode was produced by Fedora J Productions.